When it's time to fight, will you be ready? When the time comes, will you stand united? It's time to start a fight. Paragon, play for free now.
We recently got a chance to test out the Battlefield 1 closed alpha, and I spent most of my time playing as a scout. For veterans of the Battlefield franchise, this class shouldn't be a far cry from what you've come to expect, but there are some key differences. As most good scouts, you want to be, well, scouting. This means surveying an area, marking enemies, and backing up your team from a distance if things get hairy. The only map in the alpha is St. Quentin's Scar, and lucky for you, this French countryside is a haven for snipers. A basic rule of thumb is to stick to the edges of the map. This makes you less of a target for enemies, but it also gives you the best field of view. That is, you won't need to constantly be rotating to cover the entire battlefield, glancing up hills and around buildings at the center of town. But of course, rules are made to be broken. Obviously, there's no one good spot that will give you a good vantage of every objective, but there are certainly plenty of good places to snipe from. I would avoid towers and windmills because that tends to be the first place most people look. And whether someone is in one of these or not, people like to watch them collapse, so instead let's stick to more unassuming buildings for now. One in particular that I found to be effective is located near C. From here you can cover 3 objectives, and there seems to be no shortage of targets wandering around in the open. If you don't think you can hit a target from here, make sure to mark them for your teammates. Another area that worked pretty well for me was the hill right above E. It doesn't take too long for this hillside to get cratered up from artillery and heavy weapons, so camp out in a crater and you should have some decent cover and a nice view of the town. A lot of people like to hide behind this door, so keep an eye on that. It's also worth mentioning that for some reason shooting through doors and windows hasn't been all that effective as a scout.
I'm with you, pal. Let's go.
Now it's time to pick a weapon. In the alpha we had access to 3 sniper rifles, each with 2 variations. To be frank, there really isn't a huge difference between these rifles. The Russian 1895 is a lever-action rifle, and the Gewehr and SMLE are bolt-action rifles. All 3 of these rifles have similar fire rates and can deal quite a bit of damage. The biggest difference, however, between these weapons are the effective range. In Battlefield 1, snipers have a sweet spot. If you hit someone at a certain range, it will do extra damage. It's also worth noting that just like previous games, you'll have to take bullet travel time and bullet drop into account. Although, judging from the snipers I used, bullet drop was pretty minimal. I rarely had to compensate for it.
Ich hab hier einen feindlichen Speer.
Lastly, let's take a look at the equipment. Unfortunately, scouts only have access to 2 gadgets in the alpha. But let's start with the flare gun. You only have 1 flare, so make sure to use it sparingly. When you fire it, enemies should light up in that direction on your minimap. During my time, I did not find the flare gun all that useful, but it does deal fire damage, which is kinda cool. The other gadget are anti-armor rounds you can load into your rifle called K rounds. The range for these aren't too far, but if you're at the right distance, it can deal a little bit of damage. I found it best to use these on vehicles that were already disabled or some of the smaller, quicker vehicles. As with any class, you'll develop your own methods the more you play as Scout, but these are just a few of the fundamental differences and tips that should get you started once you get behind that scope. If you enjoyed this video and you're itching for more Battlefield 1 content, make sure to like and subscribe down below.